Hello, Gophers. I'm really excited about the 30 people who are in the audience. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're really excited about this. I'm super excited. I'm new to Go. This is my first GopherCon, and I've already lost my voice, so bear with me here. So today what I want to be talking about is my favorite thing, Go and Windows. And what's really awesome about it is, a lot of us know that Go has amazing support for cross-compilation and working with different operating systems. I'll talk about that a little bit, but I also like to focus on is the other parts of it that you don't always think about, which is how do I make a really good user experience for people who happen to be on Windows? And if I'm really lucky, how can I lure in other Windows developers to help share the load and contribute to my project and ensure that it still is a great user experience on Windows? So you may be wondering, Go has good support. Why are we talking about Windows? And story time. So I'm kind of an odd duck. I got my start as a Windows developer long ago. And so back in the day, right, I worked on a Windows machine, okay, and I had a whole, Microsoft, I had a Microsoft stack only, right, so I'm using C# and any approved Microsoft technologies. It's all closed source. It's in Visual Studio. I deployed a Windows server, and all my users are on Windows. And as a developer, it's kind of comfy, right? But it's a bubble. And there wasn't a lot of looking and seeing what's going on the other side. But I said I was kind of an odd duck in that I also was a developer on Linux by night. So when people weren't paying me, I was off playing with Linux instead. And it was a completely different ballgame. So at that point, everything's open source for the most part. I'm playing with a stack of whatever I want and deploying to multiple distros. And for the most part, my users are other geeks like me who are on Linux. And so you kind of have these two camps back in the day. Windows devs had no clue what was going on and didn't really care. And the same thing, people would hang out on the Linux Mac side and didn't really care what those silly Microsoft people were doing either. And if you think that's what the world is like today, it's not. So I'm still kind of a Windows developer, but I don't have a Windows machine like you can't see here, but I have a Mac. And I program in multiple languages, Go, C#, Java, Python, Ruby. I don't care. I'll code in it. And I deploy to Linux servers, Windows servers, Docker containers, multiple clouds. And I don't even have dual booting on Windows here. I just pop into Windows when I want to work with C#. And my point here is that I'm not unique at all. There's a ton of Windows developers like me who they have a little piece of the pie that they work with. It's all Microsoft, and there's that bubble again. But then there's a huge portion of stuff that we work with that is a lot more of what you'd consider your playground, okay? So the walls have come down between our two groups. And if you're looking for new users, or you may actually have a bunch of Windows users and not even realize it, and they're coming over more and more every day, are figuring out that we have all the fun dev tools, and they're gonna come play with us. So that sounds cool, but I've worked with a lot of cross-platform apps, and Go supports cross-platform, right? The problem I see over and over again, and the pain I feel, is that they're often developed Linux, Unix first, essentially. And what I mean by that is I develop it on my Mac or on Linux, and I get everything working, and eventually someone taps me on the shoulder and goes, "Can you please compile this for Windows?" Sure, I'm a cool person, I'll compile it on Windows for you. And then I do that, and I give it to them, and I think I've done them a great service, and dust off my hands, we're all done. But they get it, and then it's not easy. So they expect to be able to install it just like anyone else. But there's no package, there's no installer. They either have to download a rando binary off the internet or build it themselves, have fun with that. They expect it to just work. Maybe they have a Mac somewhere, they've used it before, and it does, it just works. But when they go to their Windows machine, it's just death by 1,000 cuts of things that just don't work exactly the same or the way they would expect it to. That's fine. No, okay. It's a little rough, but I'll go read the documentation, no problem. So I go and I look at the documentation, and one of the first things that hits me all the time is everything's documented just for bash. And that's cool, I write in bash, but Windows users have PowerShell available to them, not bash, so that's kind of awkward. You're like, that's fine, okay, whatever, I found a bug, I've been using it for a while, I want to be a cool person, I want to contribute to your Go project. But beyond doing like Go build, the rest of the build script is probably completely unavailable to me because it's written in some language that I don't have. And that can be very frustrating. And the sum result here is that I was excited about your app and I wanted to use it, and then I really kind of lost all my enthusiasm because it didn't feel like I was really welcome. Like, it's cross-platform, but do they really want me there? And that's what this talk is all about, is fighting that Linux-first development philosophy and figuring out how we can bring people on board without like this awful SpongeBob experience. So this is what I do in my day-to-day. I work on the Rackspace developer experience team, and I support a couple different apps. And I mean, at the end of the day, what's important to me is whatever product we put out there, and I work on all dev tools. So it's kind of fun writing stuff just for yourself. But I just want things to not suck on Windows. And as the only developer on the team who is willing to admit that they even know Windows and can try something out, I get pulled into helping out with other tools and things like that. So this is where I have most of my experience with. I said I was new to Go, and here's my little Go story, is that, so my team, we work on a Docker as a service product. So the first thing we wanted to play with was something called the Docker Version Manager, DVM. And it's this nifty little tool, and I was happily using it, and I went over to my Windows machine. I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna use that. And I instantly realized, like, aw, fail. It's a bash script. So I couldn't use it. So I decided, okay, well, I want to make this cross-platform. And I heard Go was cool. I heard it had much better cross-platform support than, say, Java or C#. So my very first pull request, the DVM, I rewrote the entire thing in Go and just kind of submitted it to them, like, boom, have fun with that pull request. But Kyle's cool. He was the one who originally wrote it, and he eventually merged it in. And now we have DVM, and it works on Mac, Linux, and Windows, and it's all happiness. So that's like my baby. So later on, though, I was working on a command line tool for our product, Karina. And I thought, hey, you know, this should just work on Windows, right? We wrote it in Go from the start. No problem. So I pull it up on my Windows VM, try to use it, and fail again. It's trying to like write to my home drive, and it expects to be able to do things, but they only work on Linux and Mac, not on Windows. So even though we were written in Go and we thought we were covered, we weren't, and I had to kind of contribute to that. And another area where I've helped out is on the Rackspace command line tools. None of these tools matters, but just letting you know like where I've been. Is there was really nice installation instructions for everybody else. So if you were on Linux, you could pipe into bash, because you know that's a thing. On Mac, you can install it with Homebrew, and on Windows, go to our GitHub releases page, figure it out, find a binary, download it, put it somewhere, add it to your path, have fun with that. So I wrote a installer for it. And my point here, I guess, is like, this is what I'm gonna be talking about, is the things I've learned from these projects. And you know, I'm very new to Go, love it, but I'm not new to cross-platform development. And so that's kind of my background and kind of where I'm giving you all my hints and tips, I guess. So enough about that. Let's talk about Go, right? So Go has amazing cross-platform support. We all know that, and that's awesome. But that's actually just the first step. That's like the foundation of being able to do anything cross-platform. But just like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I want to be able to do more. Like survival is awesome. I'm sorry about that. Survival is awesome, but I want more. I want to be able to do more. But let's start with surviving first. And this is why, even though I'm a Java developer and a C# developer and a Python developer, if I'm writing something cross-platform, I do it in Go. And that's because I can just say, what's my OS? Windows. What's my architecture? x64. Go build. Oh, like, that makes me so happy. But it's extremely easy, and You guys know that, so I'm not going to belabor the point. Here are some other pieces, though, that are also really useful to get into. Oftentimes, you're going to need different logic for Windows, or maybe just slightly different values and constants, and then use something different for Mac, Linux, Solaris, whatever. And Go is really smart. And the way it can do this is it looks at your file extensions. So say I'm targeting, during my go build command, I'm targeting 386 or 64. It's going to look, oops, sorry about that. It's going to look for those file extensions and compile in that file, include it in the build, and ignore the other ones that aren't being targeted. And the same thing for Windows, Darwin, Linux, whatever my target is as well. If I have special logic just for Mac, I can put it in that file and it'll get compiled in. That works great, but a lot of times in my world, with the 3 operating systems I support, I kind of have 2 camps. I have like Mac and Linux, and then Windows. So basically Windows and everybody else. So I like to make files that just contain everything for Mac and Linux. And the way I do that is, you see I have here nix.go, and nix is like made up, like Go has no clue what I'm talking about there. So what you can do is at the very top of your file, you can add a comment that says, when I'm doing a Go build, this is what I'm targeting, or this is what I'm not targeting. So right here, I'm telling Go, when I say nix, what I'm really trying to say here is anything that's not Windows. So let's jump into an example of that. This is my magical Go program. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. And I need to get a magical file path, okay? And on Linux and Mac, I want to be able to use a bash script. And on Windows, I'd like to be able to use a PowerShell script, and that's what that .ps1 is. That's the file extension for PowerShell. So what happens here is when I do Go build, if I target Linux or Darwin with my Go operating system variable, it's going to build in a constant that's using bash, and it's going to use that function that I have there where I'm using the home environment variable. And it's going to ignore everything else in Windows. It doesn't even look at it. Now, alternatively, if I'm targeting Windows, it's going to ignore everything in the nix file, and then it's going to build in my other constant, my other function. So even though you see these duplicate functions, only one of them ends up in the code when you build. I feel like I'm dropping the mic every 30 seconds. Sorry about that, guys. So that handles the Go side, but as you're developing, there's still other things that are really helpful to be aware of about Windows and it's all its quirks and oddities. So let's say you saw my example before. I wanted to store things or grab things from the user's home directory. So on Linux, Mac, that's home, right? But the environment variable on Windows is called user profile. And that ends up being like C users Carolyn, something like that. For the path, they seem pretty similar, right? They both have the same name. And the only distinction, though, is that Linux, Mac is going to use colons. Windows is going to use semicolons. Usually not a problem. Like when I was working on DVM, one of the things I was doing was like going through the path and mangling things and doing weird stuff like that. So that was useful. One variable that I really like, and I don't have on Windows, is called shell. And what shell does is it says, hey, this is my, as a user, this is my preferred, I'm just not going to gesture anymore. This is my preferred shell to use. So ZSH, fish, ash, whatever, bash. On Windows, there's no convenient way to say, hey, I really like using PowerShell or CMD, so would you please respect that and use that? You just have to get creative. There's no real good way to figure that out. Another environment variable is tempter, which, it looks like I'm getting someone to help me out here. Hey. Yeah, that'd be great. Cross your fingers for me, people. Okay, so tempter is another one. And on Windows, they actually have two different environment variables, TMP, TEMP, exact same value, however much you like or dislike vowels. Go ahead and use it. My favorite, though, is one that you never use, but is ridiculously convenient in cross-platform development. And that's only in Windows, and it's called path.ext. What that means is when I execute a command, like I open up a prompt and I type in, like I have my app, right, magic.exe that we just built a minute ago. If I type in the word magic, Windows will actually find it for me. And the reason why I don't have to type in magic.exe, I can get away with being lazy and just type in magic, is that path.ext has a list of common file extensions, like .com, .bat, .exe. And it finds it and goes, I know you want to run. I can do this for you anyways. And it's super useful when I'm writing documentation, because I don't always have to keep saying magic.exe here, just magic somewhere else. I can just document it one way, and in my scripts, I can be lazy again. So very useful right there. File paths. This is the one that everyone thinks is going to like suck really hard for Windows. But with Go, it's actually a non-starter. It's not a problem at all. Use the file path library everywhere. I don't care what the file is that you're targeting, the platform you're targeting. Just use file path, and you're done. Like, okay, Go just did all the things for me here. And that's usually like 90% of the battle. But if you have scripts or other things going on, there may be a bit more of an ecosystem around your app beyond just like the Go application. A couple like things that are useful to know about Windows and file paths is Windows actually does not care if you use forward slashes or backslashes. Like go into a prompt and try it, go into File Explorer and try it, like it'll figure it out. So don't bother, just do the easy one, right? That hard reach up to the backslash is unnecessary. Another thing is Windows loves having white space in their paths. And I get bit by this all the time where like I don't feel like coding everything. And, oh God, those extra keystrokes. But it causes silly little bugs. And eventually someone will tell you that, oh, I tried to do something in C:/my space special folder. And if you just quote your paths, it's not a problem. This is my favorite, though. Windows, for some reason, has always had a limit to the length of a file path. And fun story about this is that NPM, the Node Package Manager, the old version, not version 3, when you did an NPM install, would make a ridiculously long file path, like recursively adding in files into the Node modules directory. And those paths would become so long that you basically break Windows. So you go into File Explorer and try to delete it, you couldn't. Like, no problem, I'll delete it in PowerShell. Nope. I'll delete it in Bash. Nope. Git clean. Come on, just get this off my machine. Nope. It was like that for at least a year, if not longer. And that's a great example of, was it cross-platform? Yes. Was it a good experience? And did Windows people feel like they were part of the project? No. All right, so we've got code, and I've been talking about experience some more. And let's go a little bit deeper into what we would need to do to give Windows users a pretty good experience with our application. And in my mind, one of the most important things you can do is document your application for your users. Okay, I mean, I just salute anybody who writes documentation and values it, because I think it's really important and it's usually undervalued. There's 3 different areas that when you're considering like beefing up your Windows support or adding in to your non-existent Windows support, a couple things that are really helpful. 1, how do I install? Also, how do I use your app if it's like a command line tool? And then 3, how do I contribute to your project? A little detour here. None of what I have up here matters. It's just the example of how I like to document whenever I need to jump in and show people a Windows-specific thing and like a Mac-specific thing or a Linux-specific thing. Usually, like all my documentation, all the example, the text is the same, and it's just the code snippets that are slightly different. So this is kind of, if you want to crib off me, go for it. What I found really useful is to indicate to people so that they copy and pasted my documentation and put it somewhere else, if it's a PowerShell command or a Bash command. So for Bash, I'm using the $ command prompt to kind of hint at what this is. And then for Windows, most people are used to seeing that greater than sign. And it just kind of helps visually separate things. Now, on Windows, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but either way, there's actually multiple shells available to most people, especially if they're a developer. CMD, old school, don't like it, don't use it. PowerShell is pretty powerful, though really wonky if you're used to like Bash and things like that. It's a little odd, though, because there's multiple versions out there, and it's not always clear, like when you just Google, how do I do X in PowerShell, what version snippets you're getting back. So my recommendation is if you're writing documentation for people, just go with PowerShell 4 and above and just document that and ignore the other shells and different versions. I say 4 because that supports Windows 7 and up and has a pretty good set of functionality there. It's kind of tempting as a developer to go, oh, I'll just document it once in Bash and then everyone is happy. But only developers will have Bash on their machine, which is great, I guess, if you're writing doc for only developers. But if you have anybody who's not a developer who's using your system, not so useful. So I have my doc. This is awesome. Now let's look at how we can have the installation experience be really great. And it may be tempting to go install Magic. Again, I don't recommend that. Sure, that would get the binary on their machine if they already had Go and they were a developer. But if you're not a developer, I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to do. And it's not really great replacement for a full package manager type installation experience where you can upgrade, uninstall, and completely go to a specific version, etc. So Windows has a package manager called Chocolatey. And it lets you do the equivalent of like apt-get or Homebrew, but on Windows. And it's super simple, just choco install Magic, right? Or whatever your app name is. Now, if you'd like to live dangerously or you just aren't keen on package managers, PowerShell's ability to pipe into shell. So what this is right here is, if you want to do that, IWR is internet or invoke web request. It's basically curl. So I give it the path to my installer. It'll download it, and then it'll send it directly back into a PowerShell session and execute it. But I think Chocolatey is really cool, so let's talk about how you can make a Chocolatey installer. And it doesn't require crazy stuff. We're not making MSIs here or anything like that. A Chocolatey package is a zip file and one extra file that says what the heck the package is. So this is a full definition for Magic here. And it just has a little bit of metadata, says what it is, does stuff and things. It's a great package. And it says, when I build this package and zip it up, what file should I put inside? And so here, it's just a single binary, so I was going to put in magic.exe. Now I can use the Chocolatey command line tool, Choco, point that at my new spec file, and package it up, and I'll zip it up and make a little package. And from there, I can push that package to various indexes. So the main one that everyone has on their machine is the Chocolatey index. So if I did a Choco push and left off the source, it would automatically go to chocolatey.org. I don't recommend doing that, though, right off the bat. Usually when you're trying to figure out how to try out a new packaging tool, it helps to push to a test feed. And there's a bunch of different places, I'll get into it a little bit later, where you can make a test feed and then practice making a package and pushing it and seeing what it looks like and figuring it out before you go screw up your feed on Chocolatey. So once you have that up there on Chocolatey, though, it's super easy. People can just go Choco install Magic. And the fun thing about Chocolatey is that when you install binaries using Chocolatey, it immediately puts that binary on the path. So you don't need to muck around with your path or load anything or put something in your user profile. And it can immediately type in Magic, not magic.exe, remember, just Magic, and bam, it'll run. So this is my magical application. It's pretty awesome. But if you're not keen on package managers or you're not interested in having to go through moderation, I recommend just a simple install script. And this is really all you need. It's actually probably more than you need. Remember when I said I recommended PowerShell 4 and up? This just does a check. And it basically prevents you from getting bugs, hopefully, of people going, I tried to install it and it like died halfway through. This will tell you right up front, like, yo, you gotta be this high to ride the ride. And then it downloads the binary for you, puts it in an installation directory, and then tells people, hey, I've installed this, here's how you add it to your path. So it doesn't need to be complicated or elaborate. So I think we're in a pretty good place, right? We've got an application. People are actually using it. This is awesome. So I want people to contribute now. I don't really want to like test on Windows and support Windows. It'd be awesome if people would just come along and give me pull requests. So before they can do that, though, they need to be able to build it. And honestly, they need to be able to build it on Windows. So let's talk about what that looks like. My favorite, like my goal for any project I work on is I should be able to run git clone and then one command, one script, and I should have everything I need. So obviously, I already had bash installed and git installed. That's not what I'm talking about. But say I use glide or GB or GoVendor or whatever. It's really helpful if your script gets that for you, checks to see if you have it, and if you don't, just grabs it for you and uses it. It makes a really welcoming experience for new contributors. So you may be wondering, though, Windows, why is she talking about bash and make? Aha. A lot of people don't realize this, but you actually can use bash and make and a whole bunch of other fun tools on Windows. And most Windows developers have these tools even if they don't realize it. And what I like to call this, what I like to call this is lolnix, because cats. So lolnix is my little pet term for a Linux-like environment on Windows. And it gives you bash, sed, awk, grep, I don't know, cat, whatever tools you like to use. And the reason why most Windows developers have this is anybody who's interested in your project is probably on GitHub or something like that, and so they have Git installed. Well, Git is a Linux tool, and it brings along with it an entire environment. So ways people could have this is they installed Git for Windows, or if they're super hardcore, they have Cygwin. But my absolute favorite, if you want to put this on your Windows machine and try it out, I recommend the Git for Windows SDK. It's just like Git for Windows if you're used to that. It's a familiar environment. But what it adds is a package manager, Pacman from Arch Linux. And what that lets you do is install other tools. So you can just bring all your old friends over from the Linux world and just be like, I want to be able to use make. No problem. Pacman-s make, right? My point being that it's not a big ask to say, if you want to contribute to my project, please use bash or make files. We're not asking that of our end users, just people who are contributing. So here is a simple make file for building my magical Go project. And as I said before, I like it to be a one-stop shop, so I'm installing Glide just in case they don't have it. And then I have a target for each one of my platforms. In my world, I only have 3 platforms. I know there's more. And then I have a magical target that just does all the things. And that's all you need. Now, if you're not a fan of make, or you just like other scripts, this is an equivalent bash script that does basically that cross-build. So again, it gets all the dependencies and then just builds all the things. And you can just kind of dust off your hands and go, hey, all right, Windows people, come and get it. One note about that real quick, though, is it's about 99% the same between Mac and Windows, or Linux and Windows. You may find occasional odd differences. But there's a way to figure that out and realize when you've made something that doesn't work on Windows. And that's CI, okay? So I know I have this last, but it's still very important. It's just you need to do all these other things first before you can tackle CI. And if you've ever done CI with Windows, you know that there's one player, AppVeyor. AppVeyor is pretty much the only one out there who will give you free Windows builds. Until today, woo! I'm really excited about this. I've been working with the MyGit team for the past couple weeks, and they support Go now. And not only do they support Go, but they have the Git for Windows SDK installed. So if you want to write make files, you can use that with MyGit and do your builds there. So yeah, awesome. And a couple differences between these two. One, obviously, I am in love with and a huge fangirl of MyGit, because that team is amazing. You can email them and they will reply back at odd hours. But also, AppFair is incredibly popular, and their build times, the build queues, I don't mean to like diss AppFair. They're doing a good service, but they're slow. Like oftentimes you'll check something in, and 8-10 minutes later, you're still like, my build hasn't started yet. With MyGit, like they're a little bit of a dark horse, or probably abusing that entirely, but you know, not a lot of people know about them, so as soon as I commit and push, the build is like started up, which is awesome. So AppFair, if you haven't used it before, it's really easy to get started with. You sign up, log in with like your GitHub or whatever, and when you make up a new build, it has this interface where you can just say, oh, you know, here's my repo, this is what I want to do, I'm going to copy and paste some scripts and steps that I need to run. And then when you're done, you can export it into a YAML file so that you can kind of check that in and not have some very important part of your system outside of your source control. And so they already have Go installed and everything. All you need to do is tell it, hey, I want to check out inside the Go path, because that's what Gophers do. Let them know where the Go path is, and then embed a build script. This is in PowerShell here. And really the only setup I'm doing, you saw how I was doing go, get, glide, and I wanted to immediately then use glide. In order to do that, I had to put the go bin in my path. And then otherwise, this is what I meant by there may be oddities or things where like your build script doesn't work on Windows. This is how you find it, okay? So I'm using the same build script on my machine, say on my Mac or Linux. The Windows developers who are contributing are also using it. And Travis maybe is using this. And now AppFair or MyGit is going to use this script as well. So if it doesn't work on Windows, you will know as soon as you commit, which is awesome. Now another piece that I kind of gloss over a bit is that Chocolatey is a Windows tool. And you're wondering like, how am I supposed to be pushing regularly, my new installer updates? This is how. So after a build is done, I have a little script here called publish that basically just does a Chocolatey pack and then a push and sends that up with every build. So on MyGit, what does that look like? I'm showing you a picture here of MyGit just because the UI is like slick and sexy. But you're looking for build services, okay? And you may need to configure a couple environment variables because MyGit doesn't use like a DSL like Travis or AppFair here. Instead, they just give you a PowerShell script, and they're like, we will call this. Put whatever you want in there. So I do a couple things. One, MyGit doesn't let you say where I want to check out my code. So the first couple lines is me just shoving all my code under the Go path appropriately. The next step is just something I like to do. So I'm using Git for Windows SDK, and by default, Bash is like hiding off in some silly little like subdirectory, and I bring it up and put it in the bin where I'm used to seeing it, just because a lot of my scripts rely on that being there. So then I go to build, and this is one of the unique things about MyGit versus AppFair, is that you can use make. So here I'm calling my make file and executing it, and then just like I did with AppFair, I'm publishing it out. So what have we done here today? Well, one, hopefully you're already convinced that you want to support Windows, but if not, you realize like there's a lot of potential users out there who want to join up with you, okay? And we figured out how we can use Go, and how Go already has awesome cross-platform support, so that's super easy. It's not really hard for us to add support for Windows. We looked at a couple of weird Windows things that you may find useful as you're supporting Windows. How to bring in contributors and make it easy for people to come in and fix the random Windows bugs for you, and then how to automate it all. All of these slides are going to be available online. I have a link at the very end here. But if you want to see like where I learned how to do Go, it's all Dave Cheney's blog. And then otherwise, more information about Linux and packaging. And if you want to see my magical demo code and see what that looks like, it'll all be available there. So I hope you take away from this that it's worth supporting Windows, and I know that may not be your operating system of choice, or if it is, like, awesome, because I use all of them. It's worth doing, and it doesn't have to be a huge imposition on you to do it. There's a couple things you can do, and then bam, you've got Windows support. And people who are using your app don't go, oh, it doesn't work on Windows. Instead, they can be like, yes, it works on Windows. So thank you very much.